Hi, everyone, and welcome back to The Things We Know. Today, we are diving into a topic that I think is getting a lot of traction these days, the phenomenon of trad wife or traditional wife. So, women who are, I mean, in theory, it's women who are choosing traditional homemaker roles as a way of life, stepping back into the 50s, but with Instagram filters or TikTok or whatever you want to put it.
Right. And we're not here to judge. I mean, maybe a little bit. Actually, we are. But there's some fairness we can give to some people who really kind of like the aesthetic and made some economic decisions, but we'll get into that. But more than anything, we are so curious why. I mean, I think we know a little bit now, and then we'll share that with you if you don't already know. But like why this made such a comeback. Because at first I was like, I was noticing it in fashion and in posts. And then even before I saw it converge with a conservative movement, I just was so fascinated by it. Like, can you really picture either of us baking bread in a vintage apron while waiting for our husbands to come home from work?
Well, so it's interesting because my trajectory with this has been like out of the gate was absolutely sort of judgmental. Like, why would anyone want to go back to that? I am not good at baking. However, as being somebody who has worked from home or worked, like even when I was at Weight Watchers, like I worked when Darren was at work and the kids were at work, but then I also had a lot of time, or the kids were not at work, the kids were at school. But I considered
Child
myself,
labor. That's
yeah, that's a whole
another
nother
episode, child
topic.
labor.
But because I decided to be a stay-at-home mom, I felt like part of my quote unquote job was to be the one because I had the time at home. I do the laundry. Am out running a lot of the errands. And I've often said to Darren, if I went back to work at 9 to 5, our life would change dramatically because so much of what I do is behind the scenes for him. He does it, his laundry's just done. So there's a lot of the idea of like being a trad wife that I kind of always joke, like I do make Darren's lunch when he goes to work every day because I'd rather make his lunch and him not save money and eat healthier. And I do have to be like, as I hand him his little lunch pail, I'm like, this is my trad wife moment. So while it started out being sort of judgmental and like, why on God's green earth, I also I find it fascinating, and I do actually, after reading some of these articles that we're going to talk about today, I feel a little less judgmental. It depends, but it all ties to what is their desired outcome.
Right. And I suspect because we don't like to talk about everything before we come in here. So I suspect you and I will have similar responses of things we didn't realize. What I want to say too, it is interesting, and this will come up, like you said, as we go through this. We've been married, we're both cisgender white women, been married to the same white guys for 3 decades.
Yeah.
Um, my mom did end up working outside the home once we were like in fourth and fifth. I was in fourth and fifth grade, but like she was a stay-at-home mom. But she also like ran the world. But she was a stay-at-home mom and did a ton of cooking. I do a ton of cooking.
Right.
We know this. Like in our little chat group, I'd say Melissa and I probably cook the most, even though you guys are both great cooks, you and Elijah. Like I noticed that. And I remember sometimes being like, should I be embarrassed that I love cooking?
I
I
remember
love
that.
cooking. And
Yeah.
when Brendan has to work so much extra like he did recently, like I really don't mind doing more of that, especially because we have the I cook you clean kind of rule. So I'm
Right.
happy to cook and have someone else clean up. I love cooking, so do my kids. So it is not like and I own some aprons. I mean, I could do some funny photos for the week this drops, just for fun. Like, so there are ways that someone could see me that way. I do work from home. I didn't work outside the home for a bit when my kids were little for several reasons. And now working from home is just excellent because I can also double as a caregiver. So I'm really lucky, and there's so much privilege behind everything we're going to talk about today, including my experience, right? That I can work from home, that I can work part time when I need to, those kind of things. So again, there's not. I think the reason I like react to it sometimes is because of my feminist education, because we
Right.
know what June Cleaver like we know the stats. We know, that that suicide rates of married women went way down when they were able to like develop their own financial, road path to independence. Even if they were staying married, there was just like any human being, when they have the opportunity, it doesn't mean they're going to take them all, but there is some, level of self-worth in that. So I put a lot on that. Like I look at it and I'm like, what is that? What is that about? It's fascinating. And there's a whole community out there celebrating it. And I didn't know that, because I'm kind of a sometimes check out TikTok kind of person. I don't have a ton of experience with it. So there's like women posting about how fulfilling it is to serve their husbands and maintain the home. And then there's a lot of really funny people parodying that, for men, like men being the trad husband or something like that. And I'll mention someone later who's like, she does trad wife, but in a very different way. And as we know, it's gotten serious backlash. So and I remember telling you that when we were going to do this earlier, because of a book I was reading, I was like, it's funny because I went and found one of the biggest influencers, and she's not political at all. She's like, I just like it. So let's dig in.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's break down what a trad wife is. According to Sophie Elmhurst's piece in The New Yorker, trad wives embrace ultra traditional gender roles. So again, think homemaking, cooking, cleaning. And here's where I here's where I go off. Like I'm okay with those things, but then I go off on entirely devoted to their husband's needs. That's where you lose me in the trad wife world. Elena Kate Pettit, one of the movement's most vocal proponents, describes it as reclaiming femininity. She even said, if you put me in a time machine back to the 50s, I'd have it made. And side note, I love the 50s. I am pretty sure that I lived like in the 40s or the 50s in a past life. So, like, again, some of this really lands for me. But the idea that to be feminine, I have to be the servant to Darren is like, Darren wouldn't even know what to do with it. He'd be like, who the fuck are you?
Exactly. Right.
What happened to my wife?
I know. What do you want? Like, what did I do? What did I do?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, there's so much weird. It's so interesting, the simplicity of it. I watched in preparing for this, I watched some like interviews that where someone from the Heritage Foundation was talking about it and how she left her career, and like talks about how simple it is. And like I don't know, there's a lot of like I'm like, but I do think it would be, we would be naive to be like, no, it's about simplicity. Anyone would. I think in many cases it's masking something more sinister. There's a Mother Jones article, Oliver Hogue, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, saying the resurgence of tradwife culture is far from innocent. It's deeply tied to political movements like Project 2025. That could be this writer's opinion, but I think he's got a lot of data to I mean, there are a ton of research bodies out there that can see the tradwife movement, mostly white women, being a huge contributor to the masses. And some really interesting stuff out there saying that not all housewives are trad wives, but trad wives
Right.
did influence a lot of housewives. Okay. It's deeply tied to political movements like Project 2025, which is a conservative agenda, to put it mildly,
A little
that
bit.
aims, that aims to reshape American family dynamics by dismantling social safety nets and returning to patriarchal norms. And if you've ever listened to us before, we're not about that. So Hogue points out that the trad wife content on social media has been doing a lot of work for the conservatives. It's really helped them, pushing women into subservient roles under the guise of choice. And we'll talk about that, especially a book that I recently read, but this is really important right now, because part of like one of the many things about Project 2025 is they really don't mask that they would like less people voting, especially less women. And there's some actual ballots out there, or not ballots, I'm sorry, bills out there that want to make it incredibly hard to register to vote and to vote, especially if you're, they're making it look like they don't want undocumented people to vote. And there's actually very few cases where that actually, they get away with it. But what it ends up doing is it affecting women whose driver's licenses don't, or their passports don't match their birth certificates. And that's getting into the weeds. But the point being, like, when you push women into subservient roles, there's a lot of messaging out there that's saying like the only the men should vote, only, you know, you should vote with your husband, and to ensure that, they're going to make it even harder for women to vote.
So the thing that keeps coming up for me right out of the gate is this feels like another version of pitting women against women, right?
Right.
This is stay-at-home mom versus working mom. Um, I don't know what world being a trad wife where you're doing all the home work, the work at home is easy. Like I just, it doesn't make any sense to me to think like this is utopia to be doing the cooking and the cleaning and the da 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 and have the drink for the husband. Like I enjoy doing, well, I'm not a big fan of cooking. I'm not gonna lie. I can cook, I just choose not to. But I think there's like I don't mind bringing Darren a beer, getting him a whiskey, like all that stuff. I like doing because it's a choice to do it. But this idea that he's telling me to do any of this stuff, again, that's just where the disconnect is. And I don't understand why this is considered like it's being presented as utopia, right? Another great piece out of Ms. Magazines discusses, and I think we all know this, or you should, the pandemic pushed so many of us out of the workplace because we typically make less money. So it's like, okay, well, we're going to stay home and we're going to take on these traditional roles of making sure the kids are getting their schoolwork done, cleaning, blah, blah, blah. And it became a way, so this idea of this going back to these traditional roles sort of became a way to cope with that chaos that we went through and then find a purpose. I mean, we're grabbing, like, we're all feeling so overwhelmed. So we're grabbing for a purpose amongst all this uncertainty. I get that. When the world feels out of control, I mean, I'm doing it now. I'm going back and watching everything from the 90s just to remind
Yeah.
myself what it was like. Like, I mean, I am listening to 80s and 90s music. I'm watching Sex and the City. Like, I'm doing everything that can take me back in time during this chaos. But when it is framed as a moral imperative that feminism is ruining the country or the world, and if we all just stayed home and took care of our husbands, everything would be fine. Says who?
Yeah. I, I it's funny you just said that, because I realized, and I think I've shared this with you, and it's not just chaos in the world, although chaos in the world definitely does it to me, and my freezer would prove it right now. I do a lot of meal prep when I'm stressed. I also do it when I'm like avoiding something that, like, you know, like a looming deadline that I'm kind of niggling with. I will kind of like mindlessly go, like, that is one of the more productive ways I can numb. I will, you know, turn on music and just kind of like, and in response to the economy, right? Like, okay, what do we got that I can make a bunch of stuff with and make sure it doesn't go bad and we can use it and all that. And like, I'm trying to teach my kids that before they go out in the world, like how to cook on a budget. But like, I really will do some cooking and cleaning. If my house is looking clean and I have a lot of meals prepped, you can guess I'm kind of like avoiding something, or like stressed about something, but it works out. Because it's funny, I don't do that all the time, but if I go into a spell of it, that is interesting. However, it is so different than like a, yeah, like a, like, this is my role. I don't think it's my role. I think they're fucking lucky when I do it, and I make sure they know that. And I will say, you know, hey, I've done a lot of cooking in the past couple of weeks. Who's up? You know, and like you said, like, I don't mind doing those things. Brendan brings me coffee every day, even if he has to get up and go to work early. And he has like, he'll come home after working 12-hour shifts and be like, what can I do for you? What can I get for you? You know, like,
Yeah,
so
Darren's the same way.
I think a mutual way of, you know, I mean, the word's cringy, but like serving each other is a beautiful, you know, acknowledgement and of appreciation for all we both do.
Well, it also
Um,
just it feels like once again, it's putting women on a lower caste than men, right? So
right.
whereas you and Brendan, Darren and I have a very sort of equal relationship. He's just as likely to work all day and come home and cook dinner as me to have dinner or whatever, or at least ingredients for dinner. He will bring me a drink the same. I'll whoever's up, you know. So you're right. We're serving each other because we're both humans. One of us is not greater than the other.
Correct. I think, I think that. if you if you kind of pass by something about a trad wife, if you kind of like skim by it and you assume, well, that means like she thinks she's less than men. Majority percentage correct about like some of how it's explained. There are a lot of people who unabashedly are like, he's the leader of this family. And that goes into some religion that people are really devout into. So one story that really hit me is from Anitza Templeton, who was a trad wife for 10 years. She shared in the Daily Mail that her picture perfect homemaking life masked a reality of fear and control.
Mm.
She said, quote, I was unburdened by the responsibility of earning a living, leaving me, quote, free to concentrate on creating a happy and healthy home. But what that episode of me taking fresh bread out of the oven didn't show was that I'd get up at 5 a.m. to start making it, not out of passion, but out of fear.
Mm.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Like that's not just one story. So
Yeah. No, and I don't know that person. So do you know what was her fear? Was she fearful of like living outside of her, like as a autonomous human being? Was she fearful of her
I
husband? Do
think
you remember?
I think there that gets into some fear of disappointing, but also
Mm.
fear of like of not belonging when you don't live up there. There is so much perfection baked in, and baked in being a purposeful pun here,
Fun.
but there is so much like fear of not being perfect is huge. There's a big drive
Mm.
there, like, to do that correctly, to do it as, and there's this weird, the weird calm voice that goes with it. If you've ever watched or learned anything about the Duggars,
Oh yeah.
there is this weird voice that they
Yeah, a
are
little bit
encouraged this like,
babyish.
yeah, to speak in,
Uh-huh.
and it's meek, and there's a lot of programming in this person's experience. I'm gathering based on other things I've paid attention to in Tia Leving's book, which I'll talk about in a second. There's a lot of programming there about like that's the proper way to be. And when you bring in, if you're listening and you have no background in control, high control religion, you don't really understand that like this isn't like a style. This is like good and evil. This is like
Mm.
good women do this. And there's so much shame baked into that control, and fear. There's so much shame and fear baked into that control. And it's how to be a good person. It's how, like, men get their orders from God, or from their pastor gets orders from God. And then women, like, that's how families work, is that, women are dutiful to their husbands, and then the children, dutiful to mom is dutiful to dad. This sounds ridiculous, and that isn't every trad wife, but her story and T. Leving's, I think, are really, really similar. So I'll just share that really quick,
Yeah, I was
because
gonna say,
this is
talk
what
about
we
Tia Leving
see.
because you were real. This is where this whole idea of this pod came from. Was you were reading The Well-Trained Wife. So talk about that a little bit.
Correct. Oh, I could not put it down. So it's a recurring theme for women who have left fundamentalist and patriarchal communities, and it is admittedly, like, uh, something I seem like, obsessed is too strong a word, but I am following a lot of this deconstruction stuff. Not that I
Yeah,
was in a fundamentalist, but growing up Catholic, I really get
yeah,
that there's like a lot of shame and fear baked into a devout experience. My parents were in a much stricter Catholic world than I was. My parents brought a lot of like warmth and love and, more Christ-like stuff to it that were actually, we would say it was actually felt like Christian, but still there was the fear of hell and the
yeah,
shame
yeah.
of, and all the stuff that where women get shamed and feel like everything's their fault. So this is very, it's very compelling watching this deconstruction happening from a lot of people who were just so versed in the Bible their whole lives. So Tia Levings, author of A Well-Trained Wife, her book came out at the exact right time on this planet, in this country right now, and she is really like on the circuit of podcasts. Love to have her, but all the big podcasts are like having her on. She's been on We Can Do Hard Things and many others. She tells a similar story of being recruited into Christian patriarchy very young, when she was like 14, because her parents moved and wanted to find a church. And in her memoir, she shares how being a submissive wife before she even, was dating, was framed as godly and virtuous, but it also meant complete loss of agency. So, and she's a redhead. She's like, I just was never meant, like I was meant to be a rebel. So like to to really adopt that, it couldn't happen overnight. Like it had to happen slowly, like the frog boiling in water. So it was godly and virtuous, and it meant loss of agency. So raw and powerful, her story from the very beginning. Like when she was, you know, she married the first guy she basically dated because like the pastor was like, this is your person, right? Like
Mm,
God tells you this is your person. And she's not just sharing her own story, but her own story is harrowing. Like, she was with someone who definitely, had a lot of mental health issues and needed, like, kind of the addict personality needed this structure and this fire and brimstone to even exist. And when they tried
ah,
to leave it together, because what happens in a lot of these high control churches is there's a lot of male egos that come up against each other, and then they fraction and they form their own churches. And there was a time where they had
interesting.
nothing, where he got even more abusive.
Hmm.
And she knew at one point she had, had to get herself out. And I think like some of her most telling points was when she had a miscarriage, she was trained by other women in the church how to submit and how to like train your kids to submit. So there was these things called blanket training, where you would wrap them with a cane, I think, or a broom or something when they would crawl off the blanket. She described it in detail, but the meat, like the point of it is to, teach children to like not explore, right? Not
Wow.
go outside like this little and they make it fun, and they, they're into corporal punishment, but they like in sermons and in teachings and in like training mother to mother, this all became part of the norm. But somehow in her mind, she knew this was wrong. And it really, her breaking point seemed to be when she had a miscarriage, and she was allowed to grieve only for so long. But like all of this is God's, blessings, and we just keep going. And the idea of having a full quiver, which is as many kids as possible, um, was a big piece of it. So you just move on. And like that broke something for her, that never really being connected to her husband. So yeah, she had escaped with her 4 living children. One night, because she just knew he was gonna kill them. And her
Wow.
story is unbelievable. And so she's been helping women deconstruct harmful patterns. And I think there's a lot of, but what I'm noticing out there is there's a lot of women who are hearing that, and like actually it's lighting things up for themselves. Now, again, this isn't Lisa and I saying everyone who likes to put on a pretty dress and makeup and cook and not work is part of like some Christian cults or anything. That's not it. But it does go, that has a lot of overlap. There's a lot of overlap there. There are trad wives who kind of want to look glamorous and not, and not like be stressed about work. And then there's trad wives who really have no other choice but to bake bread at 5 a.m. and homeschool their kids and submit to their husbands. And so I think it's an interesting time to start noticing where there's different types, and where some might accidentally be doing harm.
Yeah, I mean, and we sort of touched this a little bit earlier, but the rise of the trad wife movement at the exact same time as the rise of Project 2025's agenda of reinforcing, as you said, patriarchal norms. Women shouldn't vote, or they should vote with their husband. Creating this world where the woman is solely responsible for the home and the family, while the men are out there in the public sphere. Conservative think tanks are sort of utilizing to this idea of this idealized homemaker, which again, if you have ever been a homemaker, it's not unicorns and rainbows. That
Ugh.
to me is the disconnect. I was like, when I'm working at home, I am coaching, and then I'm putting in a load of laundry, and then I'm starting dinner, and then I'm coaching, and then I'm running to the grocery store. And like it is being a homemaker, you are working. You're just working for free. So it's just, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I love doing the things I do. I love being a homemaker. I realize I am doing free work. It's not
For sure.
idealized.
For sure. But you've also developed your own, like you've developed your own income and your own resume and, job history,
Totally.
like all of that, right? So like
Yeah.
you're doing, like when you're the one who's home more, and this is a big thing, like that I think we've done it. We done my brain blip right now. Have we done an episode on the mental load?
No, but we want to.
Okay, thanks. Um, that this is a big conversation right now in the you know atmosphere is when you're the person who's not the person who's like leaving home more or who's doing like the most work that takes your attention. You could be doing it from home and bringing in the bulk of the income, but also has the most hours away from home, especially when there's young kids. The person who is holding down the fort is holding the mental load that makes everything everyone's doing as possible, including and especially the person who is bringing in the action, like maybe their name's on the paycheck, right? But really evolved couples understand that it takes both of their efforts to create that. And the downside is the person who's doing the most work away from the family, it even if they want to share the mental load, they're not creating the connections that,
Right.
someday mean when that grown adult calls home. Are they asking for the one that wasn't, and I don't want to say dad because sometimes it's mom, but like who are they calling, who was there the most? So there's a lot of ways to look at like this choice, can create a really good relationship. But with your kids, if you're the one who's like around for a lot and a lot, but it's still really important to see and for everyone to understand that like these combined efforts are what's creating all of this. It's not him or her working and me doing all the thankless shit. It's both of us having an understanding and supporting each other and also making sure checking in all the time. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. Um, did I cut you off? I
No,
can't remember. Okay.
nope, nope.
Um, and we never want to judge women for making choices that feel good to them. It's hard not to feel let down though
Yeah.
by those who are embracing roles that ultimately support regressive politics because it's ignorant at best. It's ignorant of privilege.
Yes.
And it's complicated because we understand, again, that tradition and the simplicity. It can be a lot less stressful if you don't have to put on a suit and get in traffic or get on the subway and get yelled at all day. And then, like, sure, again, that it's a burden and a privilege to be at home. We both know this.
Yeah.
Especially when the world feels chaotic, but we can't ignore, nor should we, nor should anyone, the long-term consequences of normalizing subservience, because it's not just about choice, it's about how that choice ends up shaping culture and politics and how
Yeah.
it impacts daughters and sons.
Absolutely. And I guess we keep saying we don't want to judge, and obviously we're human, we're judging. But there's also
We're
this
doing,
part.
it's like that SNL article. No, no, no. But
I kind
actually,
of are. Yeah. But also, I guess where the thing that keeps hopping in my mind is I would feel less judgmental. Because again, I have never worried about whether a woman decided to work out of the home or in the home. We were just having a conversation recently with some of our retreat members who, realized early on or later in life that they liked working out of the home, that like being a stay-at-home mom wasn't the thing that was going to light them up. I realized that when I had a great job when I had Liam, and I went back to work for about 3 months, and I was like, hell no, I want to be at home. And then I was lucky enough to have jobs where I could work when they were at school, or work from home. So I don't care whether you decide to be a trad wife or not. The point is, don't the political ramifications of being feminism and everything that women have accomplished somewhat out of necessity, as we went through the 70s and so forth, that is the thing that's ruining this country. Like, if they didn't judge feminists, then I'd be less likely to judge them, I suppose, is where I'm going with this whole conversation. And of course, as always, social media has played a ginormous role in all of this. These women are turning what could be considered, again, a private choice. Like, you do you. Super okay with that. But they're putting it out on Instagram and TikTok and these perfectly curated videos where they're in their little 50s outfits and they're making pies from scratch. And it just feels It does feel so Stepford. The
I
aesthetic
mean,
is crazy.
it does. And at the same time, it can be really soothing to watch. Like there's some funny ones that make fun of it where someone's like, well, I made my own water. And
Oh,
and like, she's melting ice cubes that I like I got this from the rain and then and like in a ball gown making all this stuff. They can like there's this really cute young couple that don't look like they would be this way called Maya and Hunter, and they're like in their late 20s and they've been together since high school, and they do all this trad husband stuff, and like he gets called all kinds of things because he does all these things for her, and he makes her a
mm.
latte every day, and so they just make fun of all that, but they like follow the model of these, and so it's made me want to look for the ones where they're serious because my algorithm gives me all the mocking ones that have fun. And so like it's an ASMR element. There's like
Yeah.
aesthetic perfection, and it gives you this satisfying, almost hypnotic feeling of like this, just these beautiful farm tables, these fluffy looking sheep, these like blonde little kids, and these puppies, and it's like deeply unsettling at the same time because you realize like there's something lurking beneath, and then you read these articles of people who put that stuff out there and they're like, you should like, so it's like, am I supposed to feel inspired or horrified? And I don't know, I think it's mostly horrified, but there is something pleasing, so it scares me how much that must appeal, right? That it's
Yeah.
got to be appealing to stay-at-home moms who probably, it's kind of like what Martha Stewart was for
Yep.
people way back when, right? Like I'm attracted to it and I feel bad about myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how many of these trad wives are going to go out and become besties with Snoop Dogg, though, is my question.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
when's
It's
that
true.
coming out? But I mean, I think that's it, right? It, like everything, two things can be true at once. It can be uh, harkening back to this fake idea of a better time, right? An easier time. Um, but then and then reinforcing again this idea that a good woman is the one who's quiet and compliant and completely dedicated to the home. Or you could be a good woman, be loud with tattoos, and also be completely dedicated to my home. Like again, it's just it's not just that they are choosing this for themselves. Again, goddess bless, but it's that they are trying to, and it's just as I was about to say this, I was like, the whole hypocrisy of um, LGBTQ trying to put their agenda on straight people. That's what they're doing with this social media presence. This idea of their promoting that the only right way to live as a woman is the way they live. Like that's the
Right.
thing, and that is just, ugh.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that could take me in a whole other direction.
I know.
Because it's one thing to find peace in homemaking, it's another to package it up as empowerment. And when in
Right.
reality, it's dangerously reinforcing a very narrow and traditional gender role of, especially in this time where people aren't even realizing that people who benefited the most from DEI were white women.
Yeah.
Um, and then to be, to know that like out in the the podcast bros out there who are like have a
The
huge
manosphere.
audience, the manosphere, that they are all about, women should be home. Be home if you wanted, but don't be home because some bro told you to, and just or because some male pastor told you to, right?
Yeah.
Because actually, this could be a whole other topic, but I'm not that interested. But like, really, all churches are run by women. They wouldn't run without all the the labor of
Totally.
women. So just because it's aesthetically pleasing doesn't mean it's empowering.
A million percent. And then there's the added like little side note of trad wives are working if they are putting this kind of content out. Like, as you've mentioned many times, one of the things I love about my job within the things we know is I do all the social media. That takes time. It's not, I mean, I have some help. I have support in creating reels, but like I have to sit down and plan and make sure, okay, I'm getting everything out on all the platforms and am I writing the right thing? And is this going to gain attention? Like doing social media, being a content producer is not simple. This is still work. It may be unpaid work, but it's still work. And so this whole idea that curating this gallery of again fake simplicity is just something that rolls off the tongue or rolls off the fingers on the keyboard. No, I was reading the article, the one, and I don't know which it might have been. It was the New Yorker one, I think, where she was talking about, and I don't remember which person this was, so I apologize. But she was talking about like it got to a point in her trad wife. She was one of the first ones. She was the one that came out of
Hmm.
Britain, and where
Right.
she would make, meals, but nobody could eat them until she had perfectly photographed them, her homemade banana bread or whatever it was. So still
Oh,
working, still working. You're just working unpaid unless you've got sponsors, and then you're getting paid, and then you're truly working. So like hypocrisy at its finest.
quick side note that gives me just chills around because I think we've all seen people like that. I was part of a women's weekend that was like part of an auction thing for our kids' school. So it wasn't like all my best friends, but a lot of my friends were there. And one of my friends was a co-host with somebody who she had such an idea of like, and she wasn't she was, a professional, but she had such an idea of how perfect the meal needed to be.
Mm,
And my friend didn't get her the right ingredient for it. And she had a hissy fit and was just like, she couldn't let it go that this wasn't up to her standard. And she really belittled my friend for like not knowing the perfect ingredients. And for some reason, when you said that right now, that just came back to me like,
mm.
what, like how, if these hungry kids can't eat until the picture's perfect, is she snapping at them like this woman was? I have no idea. But that's the image I just got was like, you're such a victim of your own perfection. Oy.
Yeah, no question. Yeah.
But you're right, because like appealing that way is disingenuine. If you have sponsors and you're making an income from being a trad wife influencer, and yet the effect is it's making people who are not going to make any money from that follow you. That's interesting.
And
I
also
want to
not
share
feel like they can live up to it, right? So going back to the perfection
exactly.
piece, right? Like if
Yeah,
you are actively creating this content to be on Instagram or TikTok, you are putting time in that the women who are watching it and are aspiring to that may not have. And so now
right.
they are not feeling like they are not the perfect woman. They're not the good woman because they can't make their banana bread look glossy or
Yeah,
whatever you're doing to make it look so perfect.
nailed it. Like you're those little snowmen you did. That's so good.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
my strawberry Santa's bad.
it was so good. Oh, Santa's, yeah. I want to plug this woman, Shannon Babich, who actually is a gorgeous 50-year-old trad wife. Because we originally were gonna do like, how come we don't see any middle-aged trad wives? And we'll touch on that, but like she's 50 and she's Catholic. She has 7 kids. She does a lot of she looks kind of 50s glam, and she does a lot of meal prep stuff, but she's also fucking funny. She's very anti-fascist. Um, if not for the time change, I was going to try and get her on here. But she suddenly has a huge following, and she had her little following for her, batch cooking. She does a lot of meal prep stuff, and she started to comment. She's in Germany, has a retired military husband, so she's been in military for a while, military wife. She is totally flipping the script because she just had her little following and happened to mention something because she considers herself like an anti-fascist trad wife. I mean, she jokes about the trad wife thing. She sort of mucks that up, but she'll be like, I have 7 kids, but I don't think you should have 7 kids because I'm not a fascist. She kind of talks like that and does these very funny videos, but she does a lot of serious ones too. She's starting to notice trolls from like a
I'm sure.
very, very extreme cult within the Catholic Church that, has a lot of ties to Heritage Foundation and Project 2025. And they like to be, kind of in the shadows. And she's kind of calling them out of the shadows. And she will repost their shit, and she just is kind of like a dog with a bone right now with that stuff. So that's been pretty interesting. But even if you're not interested in that stuff, like her videos are really funny. She's like making multiple roast chicken while she's like talking about fascism, and she's, like putting a bunch of things in Ziplocs and filling her freezer. It's really cool. And she's openly critical of the Christian nationalist movement, even as a devout Catholic. She's like, I'm a liberal Catholic. I sing every week in church. And she is, devout, but she's not a fascist, is what she likes to say. And I love it. I'm here for it. So we'll repost something of hers for sure, so you can see it.
I mean, again, and we're repeating ourselves, but I think the thing about this is it's not about condemning the lifestyle of being a stay-at-home mom, of choosing to do the things that a traditional wife from back in the 50s would have done. It's more about what is the undercurrent there. What is your belief system? Is your belief system under this trad wife persona that you should be subservient, that women are less than, that the men should run the world? I mean, men running the world has got us where we are today, my friends. Why would that be a good thing? So again, I think I love I'm not I don't know. It's curious to me. And I do think, probably there may be many listeners who've never even heard Tradwife, because we are swimming in that water a little bit, I don't know that it's as out in the mainstream as one would think.
I think people might go, oh, that's what that is. You're right. But I
True.
think it's probably been out there enough. And to like add what you're saying, we're not ever like, I love the t-shirts and stickers that say, you're lucky all we want is equality, not revenge. But we're not saying
Totally.
men can't run the world. We're saying when women are also at the table, you know, it goes well for everyone, including the men. And that's what we're saying is like, women should not be kept out of leadership. And and in all the ways that they haven't, and they've contributed to every industry, we're better for it.
Yeah.
There's so much to be gained by tapping into the way our different brains work and how we see things and how we resolve things. And just like I was illustrating within patriarchal systems, they butt against each other, and the reason things end up moving and working is because behind the scenes women are running everything very often. So I think we need to be really transparent about that more as a society, so that
Yeah.
we shine a light on it, and we compensate it. Because a huge concern Lisa and I have constantly that everyone should have is everything's temporary. Your marriage might be temporary for reasons that you can't help, like a disease or a divorce or something. And where will you be without anything to put on your resume and without any way to earn income, as smart as you might be, if you didn't get an education? Now, you might be like, no, I trust it. Probably such a great person. Good for you. And start thinking about the things you're doing and like as a skill, and feel proud of that. I love doing that as a coach. So does Lisa. Like there's a lot of things that you do that you're good at that you can monetize. Start thinking of it that way,
Mm.
and like really start to note, like, we're all developing as humans, or we're houseplants, right? So like there's things we're learning and doing. These women, decided to go into social media. Some of them, other people could like sell their or like help their kids develop a way to do bake sales, or sell their apples that they're growing on their orchard, or like entrepreneurial ways seem like the way for a trad wife to find like freedom and happiness and some autonomy. And I think that's what Tia Levings did. She started a blog at some point, and she was like, the kind of trad wife that felt like superior as a homeschool educator. And one of her strongest messages are, don't judge these women, because they're all at different levels of awareness. And if
Mm.
people had completely rejected her when she was in her deconstruction, she might still be in there, because like judging them and making them feel stupid, or like, no, you're all doing tremendous work, more work than anybody usually has even the backbone for. So if I doubt anyone's listening to us from that group, but if you are, or if you see that, be really kind, because we're not here to
Yeah.
yuck anybody else's yum. Like if that is your thing, great. But like, please value yourself and be smart, because we don't want to judge other women for choices. honestly, if it makes you feel fulfilled, great, you do you. There is such a difference between finding joy in it and being told that's the only valid role for women. So what really worries me is how it shapes our next generation, because you're not just talking about how women view themselves, your daughters and your
Yeah.
sons. Like I have three boys. I remember distinctly, because I can do things fast and I don't always like messes. I remember I would overdo things. And I've told you this before, where I was like cutting their waffles and I was horrified. Like, if they in this house, the only woman they know is me, and they see me over functioning, that's what they're going to expect from women, and they're going to expect less from themselves.
Yeah.
So how, these images and narratives teach our sons what to expect from women. And then also, what are you modeling for your daughters? So it's just a dangerous game when it's all about subservience and silence. It can be about so much more.
Yeah. I mean, if, if, if it's only about subservience and the patriarchy, then it is a huge step backward. If we could all agree that people can do what they want to do, but we have spent decades fighting for women's agency and independence and right to be fully human and right to make our own healthcare choices. And we're watching that disintegrate in front of our very eyes as the trad wife thing is coming up and becoming more prevalent. It's a trend that is throwing us backwards. And you can choose to live this lifestyle and be fully joyful in it. God is blessed, but do not then impose that upon the rest of us as we are bad and you are good, because it just completely ruins equality across the board, no question. And so it's an important conversation to have. I want to, you know, we should always be careful about celebrating the what we see on socials, because I think we can all agree most of that is manufactured. Most people are not sharing the good, bad, and the ugly. They're just showing the good. And it making that trad wife vision the pinnacle of femininity and womanhood. I mean,
Mm.
I don't know what I am. I think of myself as pretty feminine, even with all my tattoos. And I just, it's not me. Never will be. Never was.
Yeah.
Too bad. Okay. So the song. You picked the song, and it's fascinating because we have different visions of this. I have never watched The Handmaid's Tale, and I've never read it. So for me, this song it's Woman's Work by Kate Bush, and a huge Kate Bush fan. But to me, this song brings me back to She's Having a Baby from the 80s. And this song
And she wrote
plays.
it for that. Yeah, I know she wrote it for it
Yeah,
too.
and so the song, if you've not seen the movie, the song plays over while the woman is having a baby and she's having a rough childbirth. And so it's being sung sort of in the brain of, I think it's Kevin Bacon is the man, and
He's panicking.
he's
Yeah.
panicking, he's thinking about all the things that she does, although she was a working woman, but all the things she does, the woman's work, and sort of panicking about what would it be like if she dies during
God,
childbirth.
this makes me really emotional.
I know this
Yeah,
song is killer.
I have read Handmaid's Tale. I haven't brought myself to watch it. It feels too on the nose, but I I super I know I would love it. I love a lot of the actors in it. And somebody sent me once a YouTube of a very specific scene that if you have watched it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's really intense, but it is also a huge turning point for all these women. And I love the way it just recognizes like how strong they are in the shadows, like how, like, yeah, in childbirth, because obviously the handmaids, but also just in all the enduring and all the hard work that nobody, to me, it's such an empowering song, woman to woman, is because it's sung in a woman's voice. So just the to the ones that feel like they are, whether you are at home doing thankless work, or whether you leave home and feel like you still have to come home and do everything. I love these lyrics, and I'll just read like these. I'm not going to read all of them, but like, I know you have a little life in you yet. I know you have a lot of strength left. I know you have a little life in you yet. I know you have a lot of strength left. I should be crying, but I just can't let it show. I should be hoping, but I can't stop thinking. And I just want to leave it at that because there's a lot more, but I really, really feel like there's so many ways we swallow, we swallow and don't even see our strength in all that we're
Mm.
doing. We just kind of swallow all that, desire and like hope and just kind of put our heads down and work.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful song about resilience and holding on to your own power and seeing the power in every woman you're looking at, no matter what her choices were. If we're going to go back to this, um, there's no matter what you see on the outside, whether it's on socials, whether it's somebody you know, whether it's you and you're curious about what role you're playing in your family's life, there's always a lot more going on beneath the surface. And I just, such a good song, such a good song.
And loving some domestic things doesn't mean you've given up anything, so that's okay too.
Correct. 100%. So yeah, I'm not sure there's too many trad wives listening to the things we know, but uh, we do appreciate those of you who are listening, and we'll be throwing up some resources if you're curious to learn a little bit more about this, and maybe you do know somebody in your life who's made this choice, and maybe there's a little bit more grace you're going to give them or kindness, because you're right. Talking about this may not be your life forever. I mean, the end of that original article that I was reading that you sent me from the New Yorker, the woman said the woman from Britain she's gotten off TikTok, she's gotten off the socials, she still sort of lives that lifestyle, but she says at the end, she's like, I don't know, perhaps I will get a job, perhaps we will get divorced. Like the reality of it is you do never know what the future holds. And so having grace for women who make this choice, especially if at some point it shifts for them, they need to be brought back into the fold. So.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Thank you.
We thought this was going to be somewhat rage filled. And I think, like, oftentimes when we think we're going to have a rage filled pod, we end up with more empathy and sort of like,
So much a lot. We think it's going to either be really funny and flip or rage filled, and somehow we just end up a little bit like, oh,
oh,
even like the one we did about our husbands. We were like, ah, man, and then we're like, oh.
we love them. Yeah, totally. All right, everyone. Thanks as always for hanging out with us today. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic, so you can reach out to us on Instagram or Facebook. And we are on TikTok, The Things We Know, on TikTok, if you want to find us there as well. And we will be back next week with something else we know.
Bye.